wasn't too engulfed in the mindset that I'm tracking or, that I'm recording right now, and got out of that and was just listening to the rest of my band and the parts that were there already. And I nailed it the first time. I stood up, put a strap on, and turned around and just got into it. And then I just kept like destroying through them so quickly. And it was just from that simple change. So it's about making moments like that. And that's why I love this space, because I think this space allows us, specifically with tracking guitar, bass, and a lot of those instruments like that, to bring that out and have those moments and feed off of that enthusiasm and almost bring that live energy to an otherwise very calculated, refined acoustic setup, right? And I love that so much, and that's why getting, even having like a decent mix to play back to, or sometimes I will, instead of when you're doing overdubs and the whole idea of overdub tracking comes into play, I think sometimes it's really strange, because why would you put a part twice the volume of the rest of the track if it's going to be a part that's going to be in the back? That all of a sudden puts that part too heavily in the forefront of somebody's mind. Just like if a vocalist can hear themselves too much, they're not going to want to push, So, or if something sounds off about the balance, they're going to be thinking, man, this kick drum is killing me, or this, this guitar in the left ear is so much louder. Good God. And all of a sudden it's like, it's out of whack, and they're taken out of the song, and they're not amped by the song like they would be in a live performance. So that's why it's like, for the same reason that getting your monitor mix as decent as you can to make a live set good. So you're not thinking about that, but you're thinking about just throwing that song at the crowd as hard as you can. It's the same thing in the studio, and it makes all the difference, but sometimes maybe even more so, because you don't always have that full band live tracking energy and volume to kind of comfort you and act as a blanket, in terms of sound and vibration. So,
and I think another great example of that too, when I was in school, going to school for acoustical engineering, we had some amazing facilities where we had a fully reverberant chamber and a fully anechoic chamber. And the story goes that they brought in some violinists one day, and they brought the violinists into the reverb chamber, and they had a ton of fun with it. It's so long in there that they could harmonize with themselves if they wanted to. It was really, really cool. But then you took them and you put them in an anechoic chamber. And for those of you who don't know what an anechoic chamber is, it is a room that is void of all echoes and reflections. So it is a perfectly dead, scientifically jarring room to be inside of. And you put the violin players at our school were some of the best in the world. I mean, we had a great music program. We had some amazing players. And we brought them into this room that had no reverb, and all of a sudden it sounded like they couldn't play the violin, because they had their natural environment that they're used to hearing a violin in is very lush and reverberant, and without any of that, it destroyed their ability to play the instrument and and the instrument itself. It just didn't work. So in order to get them to play while we were capturing stuff, we'd have to pipe a reverb to them so that they could feel as though they were playing in a real concert hall or something like that, even though we were getting, what was technically a perfect recording of these things. So I think it really does make all the difference to create what the intention of the track is for the performer, because that's how you actually properly emote while you're playing, and it's how you get the take at the end of the day, because we're trying to capture emotion as much as we can. And if you're working in a sterile or less than ideal environment with how things are sounding, you're just not, there's no way you're going to be able to deliver.
It's why everybody
what you are.
It's why everybody thinks that they're an incredible singer in the shower.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you step outside the shower in a completely isolated sound chamber. Oh, maybe I'm not destined for American Idol stardom, right? Under the microscope. But it's that exact thing. It's how the environment can change what you do with it and how you feel about it. It's if you ever go, where is it? We, oh my God, the Rave in Milwaukee, famous old venue out there, but they have an old, it's no longer used, but part of the building has a huge emptied swimming pool hall, and it's just incredibly reverberant room, you know, and you can kind of climb down into it and it just makes you want to make loud noises and hear the effect. And it's so fun. But yeah, the inverse is totally true. You're just like, well, I don't want to hear myself talk. Like, this is weird.
And like, so like looking at like throughout history of like what like secular music is, it's all based off of space, and like there's a whole like
Gregorian chant, baby.
Yeah, there's a whole like space and like reverb like a side quest that we can go on. Maybe we do a reverb side quest podcast series. That would be fun.
Perhaps
all about reverb and space.
Perhaps a space quest, if you will.
Space quest. Eventide, we'd love
I'll
to.
sad trombone myself on that.
Yeah, Eventide, let's talk. Let's talk about an entire podcast dedicated to reverb. I think we'd have a ton of fun with that.
But yeah, so like the space that you're in, like Adam, you're saying, like it affects so much of your playing and so much of how the motion is, and like looking throughout history and how it evolves. It like also like directly affects the type of music that you do make. Like I don't know if like Caius could be a band if they weren't forced to play outside in the desert and make really loud sounds to fill out the desert soundscape. Right. Or maybe the Ramones wouldn't sound like the Ramones if they weren't playing at CBGB's, or like
most certainly not.
Like that space affected what came out of that band. So like cultivating your space, cultivating the sounds and where you're putting those sounds, I think directly affects who you are as an artist and the art that you create.
Absolutely. I'll give you one last example, and then maybe we'll go on to some like just general broad tracking ideas and rules that we kind of try to follow in our own process and projects. But I mean, even so much so that the early years of our band, and decidedly still in some ways, I watched our singer have argument after argument about mic cupping with sound guys at clubs. Adam, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it was this, it was basically a remnant of playing VFW hall show. And it was a comfort thing. Mm-hmm. It was a thing that just felt natural to him. And eventually you get into the idea of it was born out of a few things. It was born out of us playing hall shows where there weren't floor wedges and he couldn't really hear himself. And it was also born out of him, giving the mic to other people, but realizing that he didn't necessarily want to punch somebody in the mouth while he was, putting it out to hear somebody sing. So he eventually started kind of like cupping it over a little bit. So, if they like hit it, they wouldn't hit the mic and he wouldn't, scratch him with the mic. And realized that what he was actually doing is like, Tom, it's like if you cup that mic, you get this really nasally, tinny, like the mid-range spike, right? And he was doing that because he was so used to, like, it made it cut through in a VFW hall a little bit more than just a regular full-range microphone with everything bleeding into it. So he'd gotten so used to that. But it also, anybody that knows, when you start piping sound back via wedges and get into larger clubs with large sound systems, it's going to feed back the second front of house engineer tries to turn it up, or even, the monitor engineer. So that was a tough habit to break because that had kind of defined a lot of the approach and the way he felt comfortable singing. Not to mention, when you can't hear yourself, you over push and you overshoot stuff, and I still to this day think that informed a lot of his style and the way he learned how to be able to belt, because when you can't hear yourself and you're trying to get over an entire band in a hall like that, you are literally giving it every last thing you have. Yeah. And I mean, he would be drained, like spun out, dizzy, almost blacking out, almost passing out on stage. And it's because he was pushing so hard. And and trying to shoot for these high notes and high held out notes. But it also, it came down to ultimately he had to circle back around and on some technique stuff and learn how to preserve that energy and that sonic quality of his voice, but also utilize the energy and power that he had kind of started to harness because of that, while trying to preserve that sound. So I think that's like kind of a perfect example in how, both can start to inform that style and even, no, I don't think if you're a guitar player and you can't hear yourself, you're just going to keep playing harder and harder, right? And that's how you get that energy, not just from a volume thing. So sometimes I talk about guitar players. I was like, man, you don't understand. Like, I can tell by the track that you're not playing hard.
Yeah.
And people will be able to, no one will know it, but they will say something feels like they don't mean it. And maybe it's the fact that it's all samples and the drummer didn't actually play with intensity. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's the fact that the guitar players were too trying to be pristine about it and really precise instead of just leaning into it like they would at a show, right?
Yeah.
And so it's trying to pull those things out. That's so important. But let's talk about some general rules of thumb in terms of tracking sessions and stuff, whether you're at home or kind of how we treat working with a lot of clients here and session work that we've done in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the first rule just out the gate is that when it comes time to actually capturing parts, there should be 3 good takes of every part. Because we are big fans of backups and safety takes and all this kind of stuff in the studio because, it's awesome when you get that one take that feels really good, but you never know what could have gone wrong while you're in that headspace and you're just running and gunning and it's like, man, that felt really good. Except when that crow flew into the window during that take and we couldn't hear it. I wish that was an actual story. I don't know where that came from. But you know what I'm saying? Where it's sometimes things just happen during the recording process that you have no control over. And even if you have a good take, and you think you got it in the moment, when you go back to do the edits, you may realize that you didn't actually have it or you need something from somewhere else where it's a little bit cleaner or it has a little bit more of the emotional quality in it. So I think having 3 good takes of every part is crucial for any project that you're tracking. On the flip side of that, if a performer is really stuck or frustrated on a part because you're trying to get these 3 really good takes out of it, and it's getting to the point where you feel like you're losing them, you got to move past it and come back to it later. Or you got to do a reset. You got to do something to break them out of that headspace. This is really for producers. You got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. You got to know when your artist just can't handle it right now. It's time to move past it and work on a different thing. If your singer is reaching for that high note and they just can't reach it to save their lives for the moment, tell them to go take a 5, do something else in the meantime. There's no point in tormenting someone over a part because ultimately you're going to lose that emotional quality because people get frustrated. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell people on the other side of the microphone, hey, don't say you're sorry. Just try again. You don't need to apologize. Right. This is part of it.
We're all on the same team.
We're all on the same team. And I myself am guilty of it. Oh, sorry. Start that again. Oh, sorry. Start that again. It's no, this is how it's going to go. And you never need to feel embarrassed about needing to take as many takes as you can. I can personally vouch for on my solo records and on Honey Jar records that each song, depending on how granular we're getting with it, can have upwards of 70 to 100 takes on a single part before we land on the one that we really like because we like to get that particular with it.
Also to say that, I'll just jump in really quickly and say, well, that's admirable and there is a reason that you do that. But it's also good to note, I think, that if you're, and especially in terms of vocals, that the order of operations and you can do that many takes because the morale is really good. And hey, oh, that was awesome. I kind of did something a little different on that take. Well, I'm going to use that and do that and then try to get the end of the line better or do a little different approach. So it's also part of an experimentation thing with that, which is a lot different to say, spending a year and a half trying to get one high note that's at the top of a singer's range, right at the top of the session. You never build any positive momentum. You never build any positive reflection from the artist in terms of being like, yeah, I crushed that. Or like, okay, I have accomplished something. It's just this one thing. If they can't get past like